Hey everyone, Dockwell here, and welcome to another video. In today's video, we're going to be looking at the carry tier list for the Stockholm Major that just ended on Sunday, and all week I'm going to be doing videos for every position, a tier list for every position, and we're going to be looking exclusively at the statistics for the Stockholm Major. So let's just jump into it. I'll explain a little bit about the list and the future list for each position. Basically, you'll see in this list right here, there's a lot of F tier and D tier heroes, and that's largely because, in pubs, when I make my normal lists, I base them off of pub win rates, high level Dota, all those kinds of things. There's a lot more games to be played. It's also all pick, all that kind of stuff. So everything is kind of generally spread out evenly. Well, in captain's mode, in a tournament with high level Dota, team play, all these kinds of things, you're going to basically get people picking a lot of the same stuff over and over, and there's going to be a lot of heroes that just aren't in the meta, and they are excluded. So you can see here, F tier is pretty much just all heroes that either weren't picked or they were picked a couple times but lost like every game. One of the surprising ones probably is Huskar. Huskar got nerfed actually in two ways. The first way was Huskar got just nerfed generally for the regen in the last small patch, whether that was the C or the D patch. I think it might have been the D patch. It was nerfed with the region, like I said, but there was actually a bug with Armlet, I think, from a few patches ago where it was supposed to drain more of your health per second, and it actually wasn't implemented. And so it was kind of this weird, nerf to Huskar specifically overall that was sort of just kind of worked in there after the patch. I don't think a lot of people noticed, but that is something that has made this hero a lot worse. This hero is just not as good now. It was only picked a couple times, if that, and I don't even think it won a single game. So it is in the F tier here, probably the only one that's really surprising. Otherwise, I mean, PL can be good in pubs and stuff like that, but just not a great hero right now. It's also not Illusion, an Illusion hero patch, so Terrorblade is there. But all these heroes, and Slark has actually had a better win rate, but just still really bad in pro level Dota. This hero hasn't been too popular in pro level Dota for a long time, I feel like. It's kind of a niche pick or last pick, if anything. So that's F tier, and I'll briefly talk about D tier as well. Basically, these are just all heroes that are just barely out of F tier. They were picked maybe a couple times. Maybe they're picked 4 or 5 times, and they have around a 50% win rate, but they're just not hotly contested. They're kind of niche last picks that either, weren't really played much or are just something where it's not just horrible. It's not like they were unpicked. It's not like they didn't win a single game. They maybe won a couple, but I didn't want to put them in F tier, but they kind of deserve nothing more than D tier. The only hero here that I'll talk about really in depth is that Tiny actually was nerfed pretty hard in the last patch. I think he still is an okay carry for pubs. I think you can still get away with playing him, going that Moonshard build and still destroying buildings, these things, but he's just not as good. And because he's not as good from the carry position, he was still picked and banned a decent amount, but he was played mostly as a mid hero or a 4-position hero. And so basically, people just kind of abandoned the Tiny carry altogether. He was played in a similar kind of way, but just not maxing tree, more like going for the toss and avalanche, maxing those, repositioning people with toss, all this kind of stuff from the mid position. He wasn't really played as a carry that much in this tournament, so that's why he's as a carry in the D tier list. He also didn't have a great win rate overall in any case, and once we got to the last, to the finals, the grand finals, all those kinds of stuff, loser bracket finals, Tiny was largely ignored. He just wasn't very popular later on into the main event part of the tournament, so that's why he's in the D tier. So that's the D and F tier. I'm probably going to start every video like this with just the D and F tier because there's so many heroes in there, and then we can migrate back to the normal part of the list where we look at most of the heroes that were picked in this major. So S tier for the carry tier list in the Stockholm Major. The only hero in this S tier right here is Chaos Knight, and I think this hero is far and away the most popular carry in Dota right now, just generally, but also especially in the Stockholm Major. This hero was picked or banned pretty much every single game. At the end of the Major, I think this hero was getting first phase banned all the time. It's just so strong. There is never a time this hero falls off. At any point in the game, even late in the game when this hero gets a lot of items, the only way you survive a combo from this hero is either you have to lock him down through BKB, or you just have to buy Aeon Disc, just straight up. This hero just deletes any hero on the map. It's absolutely ridiculous what this hero can do. It also is super strong early. You just get Treads, Armlet, maybe one other little item, whether it's Echo Saber or Blink or even just BKB, and you are so powerful. 20 minutes into the game, this hero is just absolutely ridiculous. So that's why it's just far and away the number one carry. People were playing this hero as a carry for most of the most of the major, and if it got through the draft after the first phase bans, it was getting picked like every game. So that's why it's far and away the S tier hero. I think it's really still good in pubs. It's going to be great. It's probably going to be nerfed a lot in the next coming patch. I think it was sort of nerfed in the last patch, but not really. It was kind of just, it looked like it was nerfed. There was kind of a weird wording in one of the things where it looked like the damage was reduced for its critical strike, but it actually was only reduced for like Lone Druid Bear and like Brewlings from from Brewmaster and all these kinds of weird, weird like fringe cases. It wasn't really nerfed in any other way. So Chaos Knight, far and away the best carry hero of the patch of the major so far. And then A tier, we're going to move on to these few heroes here. And there's kind of like weird odd cases, because basically what would happen is people, they would either pick Chaos Knight or they would have to pick another hero to kind of flex it, or pick a last pick hero that fit with the carry, with what they were wanting to do in the carry role. Carry was kind of almost, it felt like in this major, carry was sort of just, they wanted something that was just decent, that just fit with the rest of the draft, that was able to just farm pretty well and participate in fights a lot. I don't think there was any, like, that's why Terrorblade is down here, Gyro, a lot of these like farming heroes have kind of fallen off. Luna, not that great. All these heroes, they wanted something that was powerful to scale into the late game, but could also participate pretty early. So Monkey King is a pretty good example of that. This hero is just great all around. It's really good in captain's mode in general, just because it can be flexed to mid, to the 4 position. It can pretty much play almost in any position. So this hero was extremely popular, decent win rate, especially later on into the tournament. This hero was getting even more popular and was banned out a lot if it wasn't picked, because it was really good, and it was being played as a carry a lot, going for that Battle Fury build and stuff as well. Then we have TA. TA was kind of not as popular in the beginning, and then people started to kind of realize that this hero was good again, and later on into the tournament, this hero was getting picked up, I think because by the end of drafts, people realized, like, oh, what is there to really pick? Oh, this is a really good TA game. This hero just deletes heroes. It also allows you to take Roche really quick. It was a very, very good hero, especially later on into the tournament. It was getting picked up a lot and had a decent win rate as well. And then the next one is Nature's Prophet. This one is kind of the opposite, I feel like, of Monkey and Templar Assassin. This hero was getting picked a lot, especially early on, and then I think later on into the tournament, people realized it was falling off. It just wasn't as good as other people, other teams valued it pretty highly early on into the tournament. They got knocked out, like EG, etc. And then it just kind of fell off. But it was still picked enough, and it still had a decent enough win rate to put it in the A tier here. I think just with the big thing that made this hero really good is the level 20 talent with the leash that goes through BKB just absolutely makes this hero ridiculous. Even though it's not the strongest hero in the beginning of the game, it usually has a very good laning stage, and then you can rat people to death if you are from behind, and then with that leash talent, you just can't count this hero out later on into the game. But I think, certain offlaners and other matchups were being picked where this hero just felt like it was always playing from behind and it was always needing to rat, and that just never felt good, because it didn't feel like Nature's Prophet could really fight into big 5-man groups that wanted to group up and Roche and all these things. It just didn't feel great. It felt like you were always trying to rat your way back into the game, so that's why I think it fell off a little bit there. And then lastly, we have Wraith King here. Wraith King, I think, started off in the tournament just like kind of irrelevant, if I remember correctly. I did watch a decent amount of the games. And then later on into the tournament, it was starting to get picked up. I think Wraith King is actually deceivingly strong right now. I think people were undervaluing it and it was getting picked up. It's actually doing pretty well. It's a decent laning stage. You can farm really fast with the skeletons, and it just allows you to have that, that ultimate, having 2 lives, having the free Aegis, kind of allowing yourself to put the Aegis on your mid or offlane hero. It's just so valuable, especially in Pro Dota, where there's like, every little thing matters, all the mistakes matter. Having a carry like this that can basically die once and then just come back, and it just gives so much more to your team, and it also does insane damage. Like, you can jump on the back line on the supports and kill them. This hero is almost like a kind of budget version of CK, because once you get your Armlet Deso, you can just jump the back line and delete people. Now, you're not going to delete, really tanky heroes as much. You're not as insane as Chaos Knight, but you're kind of a budget hero like that in that way, and I think you can actually farm a little bit quicker on this hero as well. So these heroes, all A tier carry heroes for this major, and then B tier, we're going to move on to this tier. First, we'll have Razor here, and Razor, I think, it's kind of weird. I didn't know where to put this hero, because this hero was largely getting respect banned by teams against OG, largely because it was being played in the off lane by Amar. So it has a good pick rate, a good ban rate, and also has a good win rate, but it wasn't being played as a carry a ton. But I still think it's good enough to put it up here as a carry. This hero is pretty strong. The refresher build is still good. If you get a good lane on this hero, if you play well in this hero can snowball, and it honestly is one of the strongest late game carries because of that double BKB, the double ultimate, the double link, all of those kinds of things. It's really good. Medusa was largely forgotten at the beginning of the patch, or at the beginning of the major, largely because I think it got nerfed a little bit. People thought, Medusa's not as good. It was like the best hero, the best carry last patch. But then later on in the major, it started coming back a little bit like TA, a little bit like Wraith King. And then I think at the end, it wasn't picked or banned a ton. It didn't have a ton of games, but it was still a solid hero. So I'm putting it up here in the B tier because it was still pretty good in the right game. I'm also putting Bloodseeker up here. Bloodseeker was getting popular at the major as well. Just if it's the right lineup against the right heroes, if it has a good lane, all these things, Bloodseeker was doing pretty good. And the other big reason why Bloodseeker was pretty popular was because, as we'll see in the mid-tier list, a little bit of a spoiler here, Pango was extremely popular. Pango was one of the top heroes in the major, especially from the mid lane. So Bloodseeker is just a really, really hard counter to that hero. So that's why people would pick it up, not only to counter the Pango, but kind of pick it up, in the second phase to just say you can't pick a Pango if it wasn't banned yet, which usually at the end of the major, it was getting banned. If it wasn't picked first phase, it was getting banned all the time. Pango was. So that's why Bloodseeker was getting pretty popular. I also think this hero is getting stronger over time. Like, they're constantly buffing this hero because it's been irrelevant. So it's just getting pretty strong generally, even though the Ags is terrible, these kinds of things. It's just a decent hero right now. And then Spectre has kind of come back with the buff that it had in the last patch. It was a small buff, but this hero kind of came back. It's not the best. It wasn't great, but it did have some games where it did look pretty good. It's just typical Spectre stuff, especially with the Ags now where it gives you that extra ultimate. I think once this hero gets a few more buffs, this is going to be a very broken hero again. It's just right on the edge of that. Like 1 or 2 more buffs, and this hero I think will be broken. Juggernaut, another carry that kind of wasn't that great coming in, or it's one of these heroes that almost is never picked in majors because it's one of those good all-around heroes, but it's not great at any one thing. But this hero actually got picked at the end of the major in a few games and did win them, and I think it's because, a lot of carries were getting banned out. It was, last pick or whatever it was, last phase, and there was nothing really left to pick, and Juggernaut was just kind of a default choice that gave you some stable laning and some good kill threat, all these kinds of things, and it did win a few games. I think it is a pretty good hero right now. I think it's just generally getting better as a hero. It was really good, I think, a year or 2 ago, and then it kind of dropped off. It got nerfed a bunch. But now with the Shard and with the Maelstrom build and all this kind of stuff, I think it's a pretty decent hero, so that's why I put it in B tier. Troll, another kind of similar hero where it just feels like this hero is sort of like Juggernaut in that it almost is never relevant. It hasn't been relevant since they changed his ultimate to be like uncontrollable, and it just is one of these weird heroes that doesn't get picked a lot in competitive, but it is picked up in some games where it feels like a good troll game, and it really feels like you can 5-man, death ball with your team, and it doesn't really matter if you press ultimate because you're just going to kill everybody when you press ultimate. Like, nobody can man fight you, and there are some troll games where it does feel really good, and he felt decent this major, even though he wasn't picked or banned a lot. And then lastly, I put Morphling here. I think this hero was only picked like in 3 games or 4 games, but it did have a 100% win rate in those games. So I put it up here. You could maybe argue to put it in C tier because it wasn't picked like at all, but it did have a 100% win rate. It did win every single game it was picked, so it might have been underpicked, underutilized. Obviously, you can get countered in things by a lot of different, heroes. That does have some hard counters. It's more of a pub stompy hero, these kinds of things. But I did see, I think, there was a game, was it OG against TNC, I think, was the Morphling game where they had a coddle and stuff, and the Morphling was just feeding over and over again, but he came back. He's a very strong late game hero. You just can never count a Morphling out, and so I think he has an undefeated record there in only those few games for a reason, because Morphling is decent right now. And then lastly, we have the C tier, and these heroes are all heroes that were just like, they're not super relevant, but they're not completely irrelevant. Like, we have F tier here, completely irrelevant. Lost every game or wasn't picked. D tier was, these heroes were only picked a couple times or had a very bad win rate, didn't really play carry like Tiny, one of those things where I didn't put it in F, but it didn't deserve to have anything else. C tier was just like a little bit above that, where they either had a very good win rate and they were only picked a few times, or they had like a 50% win rate and were picked maybe 8 times, 10 times. Heroes that aren't really super relevant, but they still were picked enough and played enough to not be D or F tier. Alchemist, I think, was picked like 2 or 3 games. I think it was actually 2 games, and he won both games. So it was like, it's one of those things that the last pick Alchemist did work, and he did have a really good win rate. But it wasn't like Morphling, I wasn't going to put him up here, but I didn't want to put him D or F tier because he did win a couple games. So you could argue this hero is still relatively irrelevant, but yeah, I put him there for that reason. Luna was kind of one of these heroes, picked like maybe 8 games or so, you know, had about a 40% win rate or something like that. So not completely irrelevant, but not great. Anti-Mage, similar kind of thing, picked in some games, had an okay win rate, you know, won a couple games, but got stomped in other ones. Ursa, just kind of at a weird spot right now. Doesn't do great against a lot of the matchups, I think, is really why this hero's not picked. But again, had a few games, was okay, and Lifestealer, again, had a few games and was okay, so I put them in C tier. They were viable picks at times when there was no other good heroes in the pool, but they just aren't that great overall. So that is the carry tier list for the Stockholm Major. Let me know what you guys think about this tier list. And if you like the video, as always, like, comment, subscribe, all of those kinds of things. Go to the Discord if you haven't already. The link is down below. And I also have my Patreon up. If you're looking for coaching, I offer coaching there. Or if you just want to support me in general to see more videos into the future, consider going there and supporting me overall. So thanks everybody for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.